So it is my pleasure to present the paper Amber is Not Yet the White Knight for Sustainable Outdoor Light. This paper is a summary of some recent work that the DLC has published on amber LED lighting used in outdoor products. By the end of the presentation, I hope you'll come away with a clear sense of the work that is needed by all of us to fully evaluate these sources in order to implement them in a sustainable way for people and the environment. This is an image of our beautiful planet Earth at night, courtesy of NASA and the Polaris satellite system. While it's alluring to look at these lights from afar and be amazed at the breadth of human life across the planet, these images also tell a distressing story. We are seeing human-produced light at night, or anthropogenic light at night, caused by electric light sources. This is often referred to by the acronym ALAN. ALAN is increasing year over year in both brightness and in the number of electric lighting installations. It is estimated that 60% of Europeans and nearly 80% of North Americans cannot see the Milky Way. The image that you see here is from 2016, and it's assured that the night lights are brighter and more spread out in 2022. So why should we care? While a third of humanity can no longer see the Milky Way, more than 80% of the world and more than 99% of the US and European populations live with light pollution. The problem of light pollution is growing and is exacerbated, unfortunately, by energy-efficient LED lighting. But that can be changed due to the possibilities offered by the same LED lighting and controls. Phosphor-converted white LED lighting, or PC white LED lighting, is potentially more problematic with regards to light pollution than the incumbent high-pressure sodium, or HPS, it is replacing, due to increased radiation in the 400 to 500 nanometer range, what we call the blue-violet range. This radiation scatters more in the atmosphere, causes more light pollution when you compare sources that have the same amount of light with the same distribution. When we use high CCT LEDs outdoors or over light spaces, we increase light pollution. And if you consider that our photoreceptors we use at night, our rod photoreceptors, are more sensitive to blue-violet radiation at low light levels, you have an even larger impact from PC white LEDs. But PC white LED luminaires have a tremendous advantage over HPS and even metal halide lighting. They can be deeply dimmed, they have very tight optical control, and they respond very rapidly to a control signal. But we aren't the only life form on this planet, and ALAN has caused unintentional impacts to nocturnal wildlife across the globe. Light pollution doesn't stay in our cities and towns. It can be seen up to 200 miles away from large urban areas and affects wildlife living in and around our communities. ALAN can disrupt these cute sea turtle hatchlings you see here, trying to make their way at night into the ocean from coastal nesting sites, and makes them a bigger target for other wildlife. ALAN can interfere with the autumnal migration of birds, many of which, billions of which, migrate at night while we sleep. Birds can become disoriented and collide with buildings, and in extreme cases be trapped in beams of light until they suffer from exhaustion. And ALAN doesn't just stay in the sky or on the land, it penetrates into our rivers, our oceans, our seas, and affects marine ecosystems. ALAN also affects insect behavior, nocturnal pollination, can disrupt the circadian systems of humans, plants, and animals, and may even increase zoonotic pathogenic risks like West Nile virus. But we're not advocating that we go back to the days of yore when we only had fire. LED lighting offers many benefits over incumbent HPS and metal halide systems, including higher efficacies and superior optical and temporal control. Lighting decision makers in municipalities and with energy efficiency programs want to support their energy reduction goals and abide by dark sky policies and ordinances. They are looking for guidance on selecting lighting that allows them to do both. To help them, the DLC has introduced the Luna program for outdoor lighting, whose technical requirements ensure both energy savings and light pollution mitigation. This is done by prescriptive thresholds on uplight, restriction on CCTs above 3000 K, and required dimming and controllability. Luna, like many other prescriptive or performance specifications, only includes white LED products with CCTs of 3000 K and below, and not non-white LED products that reduce or eliminate short wavelength radiation, like PC amber and direct emission amber, sometimes called narrowband amber products. These non-white LED products may be beneficial, especially for environmentally sensitive areas and to reduce sky glow, but the lack of objective thresholds and performance information for these products has been lacking until now. We released a white paper in May with specification criteria and performance information on these types of products, and I'll be sharing the results with you here today. To understand how stakeholders are currently addressing non-white light sources in ordinances and guidance documents for light pollution, we reviewed these lighting requirements specifically for their spectral metrics. We found little agreement between the regulations or requirements. Even for non-white light sources like amber, a maximum CCT was often the most used metric, although the maximums varied between programs. Some had a maximum of 3000 K, others had a maximum of 2200 K or 2700 K. There was no rhyme or reason between them. And this is problematic for non-white light sources because CCT is only defined for white LED products, and it is undefined for these sources. So in a standard, the lowest standardized white CCT is 2200 K. So if you see a product with a nominal CCT below 2200 K for an LED product, ask for additional performance information like a spectral power distribution curve or an SPD, because every manufacturer is defining these amber products differently. The next most common metric we saw was by specifying a maximum allowed amount of short wavelength radiation. But here too, there was no similarity among the guidelines. Some allowed 25% of short wavelength radiation to qualify. Others limited down to 2% or 7% or 6%. Again, a lot of difference between these ordinances. Some ordinances we reviewed address spectrum not by limiting the performance thresholds, but by actually preferring or requiring certain sources. So for example, one ordinance we found allows only LPS sources, low pressure sodium sources, or narrowband amber LEDs. And then in some of the other ordinances that we evaluated, they didn't use absolute thresholds at all. Instead, they advised stakeholders to keep the short wavelength radiation below 500 nanometers, quote, as low as possible. I don't know what that means. And without thresholds, we are inviting confusion and unwanted variation. But we can't really blame these regulators and organizations for doing the best they can to limit short wavelength radiation. The status quo is that there are no spectral standards for non-white LEDs for general illumination. We do have spectral or chromaticity standards for traffic lights, for light sources for airport applications, for lamps on ground vehicles, but we don't have them for street lights or bollards or area lights. And in this undefined market, we see a Wild West landscape. Each LED chip manufacturer is defining their own boundaries, and LED luminaire manufacturers are left to communicate and differentiate their products on their own. So without standardization, then, amber ends up being a catch-all term. For example, if you're seeking a lighting product for use in a coastal community adjacent to a sea turtle nesting beach, you're likely to come across products marketed with the words, quote, turtle safe lighting, or, quote, turtle friendly lighting, or even, quote, coastal wildlife amber. But these phrases don't tell you what LED source is being used. You typically can't tell if the product uses a direct emission amber or a PC amber LED, and this is problematic because for turtles, direct emission amber LEDs are always required. And if you make an assumption that turtle safe lighting always use direct emission amber LEDs, you're going to find that at least in a few cases, You will be wrong, and they use PC amber LEDs instead. So how do we evaluate source performance? To do so on an apples to apples basis, we start by evaluating these newer LED technologies against HID products. So let's look at what they look like in terms of their relative spectral power distributions, or their SPDs. On the left, you see an SPD for an HID HPS product, as well as an LPS product. These are for lamps. In the middle, you see relative SPDs for direct emission amber. That's the narrow curve in the middle. And the wider curve is a relative SPD for PC amber, again, phosphor converted amber. And again, these curves are relative spectra. And because there is no standard around amber, which I've mentioned a few times, the peak can vary both in the peak wavelength and, in the case of PC amber, the size of the smaller blue hump that's going to be to the left. On the right is a new category of phosphor-converted LEDs that appear amber in appearance, but they use a completely different phosphor than PC amber LEDs, and as a result have very different performance. To differentiate them from PC amber LEDs, we are calling them simply PC LEDs. You can see here that these two are marketed with a CCT. One is marketed as an 1800K product, the other as a 2000K product. To compare these products against, again, the traditional HID products, HPS in particular, as well as PC white LED products, we evaluated them in terms of luminaire efficacy. We evaluated them in terms of spectral thresholds, for example, their color rendition capabilities. And in terms of light pollution predictions, we used an Excel tool available from the US Department of Energy that yields relative sky glow results compared to an HPS source. Now, for this analysis, we simplified the application. We didn't look at the differences between different light outputs or different distributions, in other words, different amounts of uplight. We only looked at spectral differences. Now, in the real world, we know that both light output and distribution greatly affect sky glow, as both the direct amount of light and the interreflected light both contribute to sky glow. But for this evaluation, we're keeping it simple. We're focusing only on the relative spectral differences. And then finally, we used rated luminaire photometric data to evaluate efficacy performance. And we used commercially available LED source data, not luminaire data, for spectral performance. So what did we find? Well, first, we found that photometric files for amber LEDs are pretty rare, and the LED technology within them was not clearly described, again, because of the lack of standards. Not surprisingly, we found that direct emission amber LEDs had lower efficacies than PC amber white LEDs or PC white LED luminaires. Due to the timing of the evaluations, we weren't able to evaluate the PC LED sources in terms of luminaire efficacy because there was no photometric data for these products at the time. So none of the direct emission amber LEDs and very few of the PC amber LED luminaires could meet our efficacy requirements of 100 lumens per watt for warm white LEDs. So there is an efficacy trade-off for stakeholders like cities and towns who want to adopt amber LED luminaires to potentially reduce light pollution. These products will use more power to provide the same light levels as PC white. In terms of spectral impacts, we found that there were trade-offs in terms of color rendition and mitigation of light pollution. So LPS luminaires and LPS sources and DE amber LED sources produce the least amount of sky glow relative to HPS, but also had extremely poor color rendition. On the other hand, PC amber had better color rendition than HPS and less sky glow than HPS, but would not meet the the DLC thresholds for color rendition. On the other hand, those newer PC LED products had really good color rendition and would meet our thresholds requirements, but they produce slightly more sky glow than HPS, and certainly more than any of the other technologies we evaluated, DE amber, PC amber, or LPS. So no LED source outperformed all the others in every aspect, and stakeholders will have to decide how to best prioritize light source selection for their application. Finally, we found that the SP ratio is a very good predictor of relative sky glow as a function of spectrum, and was much better than using CCT as a differentiator, which again, I mentioned we found was very common in the ordinances and guidelines we reviewed. This is really promising, as the SP ratio can be easily calculated for LED luminaires, can be shown on a spec sheet, and you don't need to use additional third-party software to make these calculations. So we, the lighting industry, need an integrative approach to solving light pollution, and amber provides a potential way to reduce both sky glow and the potential harm to some wildlife. At the present time, though, LED chip and luminaire manufacturers are developing their own naming convention, their own chromaticity boundaries, and this leads to inconsistent color naming and unintended confusion in the marketplace. At the very least, amber LED manufacturers should include an SPD on their spec sheets to inform both specifiers and regulators. But we are calling on standards development organizations and their expert members to address this problem and other research gaps so that we can deliver better outdoor lighting. We need standardized chromaticity boundaries for non-white light LED products like phosphor converted amber, direct emission amber, and PC LEDs. We need standardized terminology and naming conventions so that amber is no longer a catch-all term. We need standardized nomenclature and action spectra for wildlife and plant taxa. We need guidance on color rendition thresholds for outdoor lighting applications. Our current color rendition metrics that we use in the industry and the thresholds we use are intended for indoor applications with illuminances between 200 and 700 lux, much higher than the illuminances we use for outdoor applications. But we use them because there is nothing else. And finally, we need standardized calculation procedures for calculating sky glow and other negative impacts of ALAN. So I'll close out again by asking, why should we care? Light pollution is a global problem that doesn't just impact people and hamper our view of the starry sky, or results in light trespass in our bedroom windows, or causes us discomfort from glare. It affects billions of other organisms on the planet, from fireflies and fish, to pollinators, to urban trees, to migrating birds and bats and marsupials. And we shouldn't just care about the cute and cuddly creatures. By disrupting pollinator and plant systems, by disrupting predator-prey relationships, we may be threatening our own agricultural production. Even if we aren't all outdoor enthusiasts, we all need to eat. Right now, our ask is narrowly defined. We, the lighting industry, should get involved to resolve the amber gap so that we can ensure that high-quality luminaires can achieve energy optimization and minimize light pollution and provide appropriate visibility for people and limit negative impacts to the environment. The DLC has recently published prescriptive technical requirements for outdoor lighting that saves energy and mitigates light pollution. Our utility members and government stakeholders use our qualified products lists to ensure that LED luminaires that they are rebating or incenting are not only energy efficient, but are reliably and consistently measured worldwide. And without standards for amber, we can't ensure that that is happening currently. And so our newest program we call Luna does not allow amber LED luminaires to participate because of the lack of standards and because we need alternate suitable performance thresholds for these products. We can't simply apply the performance thresholds for PC white LEDs to these products because these products will fail. I'm grateful to our energy efficiency program members for providing funding for this project. I'd like to acknowledge Tony Esposito with Lighting Research Solutions for collaborating with us on this project, and thank our technical analyst, Adrian Martin, who worked on the luminaire efficacy analyses. Thank you for listening.